To access all the JSP files, we're going to create a controller servlet for our application. As the name implies, the controller servlet will serve as the controller component of our model view controller architecture. The controller servlet will handle all incoming requests. It will first initiate any actions that are needed to manipulate the model, and then it will forward the request to the appropriate view. To create a controller servlet in NetBeans, we just create a new servlet. We'll name it Controller Servlet and place it in the controller package. When we are configuring our servlet, we're going to add a few URL patterns to the servlet, like /category, /add to cart, and /viewcart. These correspond to specific events that the user can trigger while using our application. We're not going to put all of the events here. We'll save the rest for the code itself. This process generates a controllerservlet.java file in the controller package under the source directory. The controller servlet class extends an HTTP servlet. Because we specified a few URL patterns when we created the servlet, they appear in the web servlet annotation of the class declaration. We're going to add to these URL patterns with the additional patterns you see here. In addition to those, we're going to add load on startup equals 1 to the annotation. This is going to load the servlet when the application begins. The controller servlet is extremely important. The controller servlet handles all incoming requests by the user and takes action as long as the request includes one of the URL patterns indicated in the web servlet annotation. By default, the class that NetBeans create has a doGet and a doPost method, which, as you might expect, correspond to the get and post request respectively. But the code that NetBeans creates has both of these methods calling through to a helper method called processRequest. So both get and post requests are effectively handled the same way here. We don't want this. So we're going to get rid of the processRequest helper method, and we're going to modify the code for the doGet and the doPost methods. Here are the signatures for the doGet and doPost methods. They both take a request and a response as parameters. The request parameter corresponds to an HTTP request. This is information that the method is receiving. In contrast, the response parameter corresponds to an HTTP response. So this is information that the method will be creating. The first thing we want the doGet method to do is grab the servlet path from the request. We want to check if this path corresponds to any of the patterns we're looking for. In the doGet method, we're going to respond to the paths category, viewcart, cart checkout, and choose language. For now, we're leaving out what to do in each of these cases. But what we will do is construct a URL from the path and use a request dispatcher object to forward the request internally to the appropriate view. If you've been following along carefully, you'll probably notice that while category.jsp does correspond to a specific JSP page in our view, chooselanguage.jsp does not. This is something we're going to worry about a little further down the road. However, you should also notice that for an incoming view cart path, we end up changing the path to /cart, which in turn will yield the resource cart.jsp. For the doPost method, we're going to process post requests that contain paths add to cart, update cart, purchase, and confirmation. For now, we'll handle these packages the same way we did in the doGet method. We'll construct a URL from the path, and we'll forward the request to a request dispatcher object based on the constructed URL. Here are a few quick notes on what we did so far with the controller servlet. We obtained the user path from the incoming request. We handled both GET requests and POST requests. We delivered a view based on the user path we obtained from the request, and we used a request dispatcher object based on that URL to forward the request. If you run the application now, you can type a URL with the path affablebean/category, and it will take you to the category.jsp resource. Notice that you cannot simply put the category.jsp resource directly into the address bar. That's something that is not going to work. You cannot do the same for POST requests, because requests from the address bar are always interpreted as GET requests. And that's it for this section of the NetBeans tutorial on page views and the controller servlet. In the next section of this tutorial, we'll see how to connect our application to our database.